So, like every online creator who's a fan of the Witcher series, I have a take on the Ciri as the Witcher controversy. But unlike most of the takes so far, which are mostly in two camps, either this is CD Projekt Red turning woke and is a betrayal of gamers, or this is exactly what the last Witcher game was pointed towards and it makes perfect sense that Ciri is the new protagonist. My take is that this is all a completely invented controversy in the first place and doesn't actually exist outside of online content creation. I think that if this trailer had come out as a simple proof of concept or just story art and actually was brazenly not supposed to be content for the next Witcher 4 game, we would have seen exactly the same cycle of controversy then as we do now. Because the important thing here isn't that Ciri is going to be the protagonist of the next Witcher 4 game. The point is making content for the audiences that these content creators make content for. The anti-woke brigade of content creators need more content to throw at their audience, no matter where that comes from. This means that they have to create such content even if they don't believe the contents of it. They have spent, in some cases, over a decade curating an audience which is now addicted to outrage, addicted to feeling victimized by modern society, addicted to ignoring any possible way that they could grow as people to instead blame all their problems on others. And those problems are often invented. That victimhood is invented. And they are given fake problems to care about, fake victimization by creators whose entire content mill, their need for views and likes and money, comes from keeping that audience outraged. We've seen some of these creators actually realize that this is not just toxic for their own audience, but also toxic for themselves. Asmongold said so himself earlier this year, that he is finding content creation increasingly draining on himself and toxic to himself as he continues to pump outrage into that mill. But the problem is they actually can't stop, not and maintain the careers they have, because they've already driven away anyone who doesn't care about this and end up with an audience that is solely focused on continuing to feel victimized and outraged. So even when there's not really anything to be outraged at, they have to create outrage. They have to pretend that everything that you come across is part of this woke agenda to assault you and your masculinity. Because if they don't do that, the audience that is now addicted to that outrage won't come back, which means they won't get the views they need to fund the YouTube payments that are now what their entire career is based on. And if they try and pivot away, they know they will be looking at months, if not years, of vanishing from people's feeds as they remove one source of income from an audience to try and pick up a new one. So the Witcher 4 trailer drops. They invent a reason to be outraged about it, because woman. And they get likes and clicks and therefore make money. Meanwhile, the class of creators who are the feminist creators or the reasonable voices creators who make a lot of their money from countering that anti-woke brigade are forced to make content to counter that, both because their own online careers rely on them making content, but also now that this fake controversy has been invented by this cluster of anti-woke creators, someone needs to actually respond to it, otherwise it becomes the dominant narrative. So these creators too are then trapped in that cycle. And by responding to it, they legitimize it as a real controversy with two sides arguing over whether or not it's correct. They drive views to the anti-woke creators because people want to see what they're actually talking about. And they gain views from the anti-woke creators because that's what their content is based on. All meanwhile, people offline, people who aren't plugged in to this creator ecosystem, don't even realize this controversy is happening. They just see new game. I like The Witcher. I like Ciri as a character. Yay. They don't even know the controversy is happening. They don't even realize there is a controversy to discuss. They're not plugged into the ecosystem that is entirely self-propelling, that is created by an audience addicted to feeling grievance about gaming and the world around them. And because they rely entirely on that audience, they try and make it grow by continuing to feed grievance to them, whilst being combated by a bunch of creators whose entire job it is to fight against those narratives. And my point isn't even that it doesn't matter. It does matter. These arguments on the internet actually have impacts on media creators and the real world. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker wouldn't have turned out the way it did if it hadn't have been driven by online backlash to The Last Jedi. We would have a more diverse ecosystem of gamers, game developers, and game commentators if we didn't have this massive anti-woke crowd harassing them at every opportunity. What I'm saying is to be aware that this is all artificial. This is all created to maintain an industry that was entirely invented to maintain the careers of a small clique of YouTubers, driven by the YouTube algorithm, who themselves are addicted to having these creators continuing to create this anti-woke content because it brings people to YouTube. This has nothing to do with Ciri as the new Witcher. It's irrelevant. It's just an excuse. This is an industry in its own right, and in the end, you can just decide that it's not your market. You can just enjoy game trailers and enjoy games. And I promise you will have more fun doing it than trying to keep up to date with what the latest controversy is, invented entirely to drive a few people's sad careers.